Welcome, everybody, to episode 133 of Accents on Trial. Today, we'll be discussing dissociative identity disorder. Something that I've been always interested in is the way in which we can learn about subjective experience by examining things that are outside of the norm. And I think when we look into the kinds of experiences that are unlike the norm, it can teach us more about kind of the totality of what it means to be human and having experiences in general. So I want to bring my guest. Hey, how's it going?
Great. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So yeah, let's get right into it. I would love to know a little bit about you. Maybe you can tell the audience a bit about yourself, and then we can get right into it.
So I have DID. Um, I haven't had my diagnosis for very long, uh, but I feel like I've known about it for longer than I've had the diagnosis because I feel like in the realm of your sense of self, it's kind of easier to feel what is tangible. I feel like it's kind of like you go to the doctor to get the medicine to treat it. You don't exactly go to the doctor to figure out everything that's wrong all the time, but at least that's just my experience.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Um,
a little bit about me and my system. There's a lot of us in our system, and we all have our different roles that we each play kind of to help keep each other going. I do feel like my alters are a separate themselves rather than part of me. I feel like we all work together to keep the body going.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe let's start there. Like, for those who may have never heard of the term, what does DID stand for?
DID stands for dissociative identity disorder. Um, Whenever very, very, very young children, anywhere between the ages of 0 to about 8, the personality has not fully formed. Your sense of self and autonomy has not fully formed yet. And with trauma, repeated trauma, that can hinder the um, I view it as not allowing everything to connect and mesh in a way that makes sense to the brain. And so I'm sure that anybody who knows someone with PTSD, whenever they're going through a traumatic experience, they feel like they're back in the moment. With DID, that trauma, all you want to do is block it out and push it away and have somebody else deal with it for you.
Right. And what are the symptoms of DID?
They vary from person to person because there's a lot of dissociative disorders. It's not just DID.
Mhm.
Um, uh, my symptoms were losing a lot of time. Sorry, somebody's at the um, losing time, kind of blinking and waking up in a different spot, feeling disconnected from your body. Um, oh, oh no, I'm so sorry. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
you're
Hold
fine.
on one moment.
No problem. For those listening, I'm definitely wanting to learn more about different dissociative disorders. I know that me in the past, like I've struggled with experiences of derealization. Um, so I everything good?
Yeah, everything's okay. I forgot that I ordered food.
No, no worries. So you mentioned feeling disconnected from your body. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Absolutely. Um, in my experience, whenever I feel like I'm starting to disassociate, um, I feel like I'm not in control of the motor functions of my body. I feel like I'm kind of just in the vessel. And I'm just kind of like going through the motions, just doing whatever muscle memory. is supposed to get me through whatever task I'm doing. Um, it can be very, very scary if you don't recognize it immediately. I know a lot of times I was just like, "Am I about to pass out? I feel like I got, like, slipped something." It's very scary if you don't know what you're feeling.
Right. Um, and what are some of the other symptoms you were mentioning?
So, like we just said, the feeling disconnected from your body, but losing time, that is a big indicator, um, where I remember I would go to school and I'd be in math class at the beginning of the day, and then I'd, like, blink, and all of a sudden, I'd be getting on the bus ready to go home.
Mm.
And so there's just big chunks of time that are missing from your memory.
And you would have no recollection of anything that happened, anything you said?
Nope, anything I said, did, anybody I met, it was all gone.
Huh. Um, so you said feeling disconnected from your body, uh, blanking out, and memory loss. Is there anything else?
Um, there are lots of other symptoms that other people experience. Sometimes if they're closer to more of a healing stage, whenever I was closer to a healing stage, I started to hear my alters, like, in my head, which felt very strange. But I was going to therapy, and I knew that I wasn't crazy. I
Hmm.
wasn't broken. My brain just formed differently. And so, like, I would hear, um, little tidbits or thoughts, and they wouldn't sound like me, or they wouldn't sound like anything that I would think. Um, or you just feel like a presence. Like if something was, like, really, really close to you, that's kinda, like, also something that I had as a symptom.
When you say that you would hear, do you mean like you would hear particular voices that sounded differently than your voice?
Yep.
And did these voices speak like complete sentences, or was it like broken thoughts? What was it like?
It started as broken thoughts, but the more that I attempted to connect those parts of my mind, the clearer they became, and it became less of hearing a full sentence, but more understanding what it meant, if that makes sense?
Hmm.
Like getting the gist of a sentence without fully saying it.
Right. I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Um, and
It's kinda
so
hard for me to describe
sure.
for
And
people who don't have that kind of base information.
and getting the gist of the sentence, was that was the experience one of actually like auditory types of hallucinations?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Um, so are there other symptoms that other people experience in addition to what you've mentioned so far?
Um, I know that there are. I don't have my notebook with me. I was cleaning all day, and so I've rearranged everything, and I don't know where I put it all.
No, no
Uh,
worries.
but
Um,
if this information can be found readily available, if anybody wants to find do their own research about the topic, there are some great YouTube channels and great creators that educate in a more concise way than I'm able to.
sure.
Um, I know that there are a few YouTube channels, like Dissociative, on YouTube. That system makes a whole slew of educational content, and I really, really love their work.
So how does one navigate having this disorder, treating, and potentially, hopefully, healing from this disorder?
It's a lot of hard work. Definitely therapy is not something that I would ever recommend anybody trying to do on their own. Even though I tried to do it on my own, it led to more confusion and more of a disconnect, and I wasn't able to function in my social life anymore without getting help from a licensed professional. Um, but one thing that I would suggest if anybody feels like they have any of these symptoms, to really sit and allow yourself to be okay with the idea that you've been traumatized.
Right.
That's one thing that really is hard to get over because this disorder is designed to protect you from remembering the trauma. It's supposed to just keep you safe. Like, I'm not dealing with this today. We're not thinking about it.
Right.
It's not happening.
And what does therapy look like in for this sort of situation? Like, what sort of techniques have you learned, or uh, yeah, what kind of therapy is involved in this type of thing?
A lot of talk therapy, um, kind of processing what you already remember and then working on where those gaps are to try and figure out, okay, what am I missing? EMDR therapy, the rapid eye movement therapy, uh, that helps process really deep seated things that your brain has just been holding on to.
Can you elaborate
Um,
on that? Like, what is EMDR therapy exactly?
so in a lot of practice, it's having a sound bouncing from one ear to the next, and you're watching like something move in front of you so that way your eyes can move like they do in REM sleep.
Hmm.
And that rapid eye movement helps your brain start to process things because whenever we sleep, that is our brain's time to process everything it's experienced throughout the day.
Okay. And does that allow you to have access to the past traumas? Like, is the point for you to remember the traumas and navigate them, or no? Like, how does that work?
Everybody has a different journey. It depends on what you want out of therapy. I know that some people work really hard on integration, which is getting all of those alters to fuse. And so you can become oneself and have all your memories and not lose any more time.
Hmm.
That is a lot of people's goal. It's not exactly feasible for everybody. I never wanted that because I viewed my alters as their own people, and it felt wrong to rob their own individual experiences, which to some people sounds wild. But to me, it feels like, they helped me get through really hard times. I don't just want to like get rid of something that helped me survive.
Um, maybe I guess one thing. So that's interesting. Is there any concern on your end that when an alter is present and you do miss time, that you may do something that you might regret?
Yeah. Um, that's happened a few times where I've done something that I really, really didn't like. But um with system communication and being comfortable with one another and healing, it decreases the anger and the resentment that a lot of alters feel for not being the host identity. Um, and the host identity is just the original mind that was there before any trauma. Um, ooh, I'm like shaking. I haven't talked about this part before. Um, but at least in my experience, it's easier to trust your alters that they're going to protect you and not get you into dangerous situations if you've started the healing journey.
Sure.
Because there are lots of different roles that alters can have. Like protectors are people who are just there to protect. They'll sometimes push people away if they feel like people are not a good influence, or they'll isolate if they feel like that is your best form of protection. Um, Persecutors will hurt other people to make themselves feel stronger. And sometimes they'll even hurt themselves because it's the only way for them to get that energy out.
Hmm.
And so persecutor alters will do wild things and get you in trouble and hurt you. but they're also just as damaged. And so it's not like the movie Split where you turn into a crazy demon monster.
Right, right.
Like you're more
Um,
likely to hurt yourself than you are to hurt other people.
and by the way, if there's anything that you don't feel comfortable answering, just let me know. Like, there's no pressure whatsoever.
It's
Uh,
not I don't feel uncomfortable by any means. It's more so that some of these questions nobody's ever asked me before.
sure.
So I've never like had to like put it into words.
Begin to know has a question for you. Is it difficult to find a therapist that one trusts?
It's very difficult. There are a lot of therapists that don't recognize DID as an actual mental disorder. Um, and there are some therapists that will kind of push you further than you're comfortable with. Um, and it can really break that trust between patient and therapist if they're not able to find that common ground and work at a pace that the patient wants.
Sure. Um, how many alters uh, would you say that you have currently?
18, including myself.
18. And um, so, what are the different roles? I guess something I'm curious about is like, what leads to that level split versus, for example, having five alters? Like, what is it specifically that leads to these differences?
It's repetition of the trauma. Any super traumatic, stressful experience can cause an additional split and an additional fragment. Um, and sometimes alters can fuse together on their own and become one new person if they've done healing, even if you haven't been to therapy, if you've not dealt with that specific trigger enough, either they can fuse or an alter can go dormant and not ever come out again because what their role was to do hasn't come up in a while.
When there is a fusion, what does that feel like?
I've only really felt a fusion like one singular time,
Mm,
and it it's a slow combination of getting memories back and also feeling like you're a different person now. Like you
mm.
just feel different. It's hard to describe if you've never like felt it before, but um I've lately like recalled like a bunch of memories from my childhood that I completely forgot about.
And by feeling different, do you mean like in terms of, in addition to remembering things that you hadn't remembered before, um, feeling different how? Like as far as your personality going through a change, or some belief system or understanding going through a change?
Um at least for me it was feeling different in a sense of like your sense of identity, like the things that you like and the things that you don't like and the things that
Mm,
you want to try or don't want to try or your hopes or your dreams. It felt like a little off kilter. Like it felt like it just moved like an inch to the left, like not enough to like be a drastic change, but enough for you to notice.
mm.
Um, I remember that I used to like absolutely freak out at the sound of rain, but now like I don't mind being outside in it.
And that was a result of remembering things that you hadn't remembered before.
It was a result of the fusion, yeah.
Interesting.
It was part of that healing process.
Um, was there anything particularly associated with rain that was an issue previously, or?
Um, I I oh shit. I'm sorry. My
No,
boyfriend is
you're good. No
still
worries.
cleaning.
No problem.
Um, I'm sorry. What was the question again?
So, I guess the more general question is, when these changes are experienced, like what you mentioned about rain, were your feelings about rain tied to the trauma, or are there this
Yeah.
is there this okay,
Um, there were a few really bad instances, in my childhood where, rain was a big deal, like a lot of storms. Like my house was like struck by a tornado once.
right,
Uh,
well,
so that weather and that feeling, it's always really bothered me. And like sometimes it's that really hard rain.
yeah,
And I'm okay with like hearing it now, but still, if I feel the rain on my skin, it feels like acid. I hate it.
right, right. Now, do you ever have an experience of the alters talking with each other?
Mhm.
And what is that like? Like, what would a conversation between alters sound like, or be like?
I'm never able to get like a full conversation if I'm like fully present in a moment. Most of the time, it's like little tidbits here and there in the back of my mind. Like I'll hear somebody make a joke here about somebody that I'm able to see, or somebody says something to me and they're like, well, I would have said blah, 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 blah.
Mm,
And so it's more little tidbits. I have heard like alters talk with each other, but in those moments, it's anxiety inducing. It feels like my mind is literally racing, and it's a headache for sure.
and what are the differences between something like DID versus like schizophrenia, for example?
Um, I feel like with DID, it is more centered on your sense of identity and self. Um, and the things that you're hearing, I wouldn't necessarily call them hallucinations because those other alters are there in your mind. Um, they are separate and present, and they have access to things in your brain that I don't have access to. Um, in my experience with schizophrenia, it can have a lot of delusional properties. It's not just seeing things crawling on the walls, it's truly believing in a different reality.
Mm,
And so I feel like people who are schizophrenic, because I've met a few people who have schizophrenia, um, it's a lot more of an attack on the mind than it is as a defense mechanism.
right, right. Begin to ask, how is one diagnosed with DID?
Um, a lot of therapy. It's a lot of paperwork because it's so hard to get diagnosed. I went to like 3 different therapists and then a therapist who specializes in dissociative disorders. And the treatment can be all different, but I think I went to about a year and a half of therapy before I had somebody even take me seriously.
What do you think is the resistance from the psychiatric field towards the ID? Like, why are people skeptical?
I know that there are some doctors who straight up think that people make it up and fake it to
Mm,
get away with their bad behavior, um, which I think is ridiculous because who
right,
would want to fake forgetting half their life? Um, it it kind of frustrates me, if I'm honest with you, whenever
sure.
people don't want to take that thing seriously because I'm like, you're not experiencing it and you haven't seen it in action. So it's kind of ridiculous for somebody to say, "Hey, that does not exist. You're faking it." Well, you're not in my brain.
It's just such dismissiveness that,
Yeah.
yeah, doesn't make sense.
They'd rather diagnose you with everything under the sun first, like bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder or schizophrenia or all of the above all at once, than say you have other people living in your head.
Right. Um, so I guess one thing I would like to know as well, when so when the as a host, when the host isn't active, is it always memory loss, or are there ever situations where you're still kind of aware of what's happening, but you're maybe not up front, like you're in the back seat, so to speak?
So the way I like to describe it is I view my inner world, which is where we all live in my brain, I view it as an airplane. And there is a pilot and a co-pilot. And most of the time, I'm the pilot. I kind of keep it going. But sometimes if I'm not able to handle it, I'll switch over to the co-pilot seat, somebody else take the reins, but I'm still able to ground myself and be aware, not necessarily in total control, but I am able to be conscious of what's going on. And then sometimes I'm all the way in business class
Mm.
where I'm nowhere near the front of the plane and I'm just there in the back and I can't see where we're going, but I know that something's happening.
Are you having so as a host, do you remember that what that experience is like, or is it just darkness?
It starts to feel like I get tinnitus in my ears, the ringing, and then my vision starts to get kind of blurry and I feel kind of lightheaded. And so like sometimes I'll need to sit down. Um, and the switches can be super quick or super slow. It really depends on the situation, but the super slow ones are agonizing because you just feel completely lethargic
Mm.
and like you can't really get a bearing on what's in front of you.
And when you are more present, but more in the co-pilot seat, um, what is that like? Are you watching? Uh,
It feels
you
like
can.
I'm essentially watching my life happen in front of me and I'm just sort of there. And then I'm like, I'll see my body do things or I'll be talking to somebody, but I don't really understand what they're saying, but I'm replying to them and we're having a conversation. It feels like you're behind a pane of glass
It's kind of
and
like an out of body
everything is around you.
experience. It's kind of like an out of body experience.
And out of body, but stuck inside your body.
So I can relate to that actually very much so, because I've had that experience of feeling like I'm watching myself uh, in third person, almost like I'm watching this movie unfold, and there's this like really strange feeling of I can't quite connect with being in this body. There's something about that that seems surreal, and there's a
Yeah,
sense of derealization
yeah.
that I've had. Uh, but I've never felt like there were multiple people in my head. It always felt like um, rather than a collection of identities, I've often felt a derealization of identity altogether, where everything feels like a dream.
That I feel like that only whenever I feel like I'm coming, like, back to the front, because I know exactly what you're talking about, and whenever I'm coming, like, to the front and I'm not all the way shoved in the back anymore and I'm sort of regaining my sense and my bearings,
Mhm.
that's whenever I kinda feel like how you described, yeah.
Right. Begin to know asks, can or does the ID decline over time even without therapy?
Um, I wouldn't know in my experience. I know that some people choose not to go to therapy and choose to go at their own. And if you find a method that works for you, and if it keeps you safe, then I say go for it. But whenever it comes to you feeling safe in your own body and with your own mind, at a certain point, I feel like the only safe thing to do is to ask for professional help. And that can be
Sure.
really hard. It was really hard for me.
Yeah, I can't imagine how difficult that must be to navigate, and and also to have relationships and friendships and that sort of thing. It definitely, I'm sure it's taking its toll to some degree.
Yeah, there have definitely been times where I I've done something really horrible, but I had no recollection of it, and I had no intent to do it, and it didn't I didn't do it, but because it was my body doing the action, it still hurt somebody, and whenever they look at me, they still have to remember that hurt, and
Mhm.
so it is still up to me to apologize for my behavior even if I can't remember it.
Right. Um, Other than sort of the therapy you were mentioning earlier, um, have you learned other strategies as well to help navigating these things?
It's a lot of grounding techniques. Ooh, sorry. Um, a lot of the things that work for people to bring them out of panic attack and to kind of keep them from spiraling out of control. A lot of those things that you find just scrolling through like the anxiety page on TikTok. Those tips help me a lot. Like kind of breathing in and counting on my fingers like this. This will keep me grounded, keep me in the present moment. A lot of meditation too, to try and at least sort of communicate to the other people in my head, like, "Hey, what's going on? Am I allowed to know even? Am I allowed to know this without completely freaking out?"
Mhm. What are
Um,
the different traits and I guess personalities of the system? Like, are there um, because I know that some people like tend to like give particular names, for example, and
yeah,
they
I
might
have
sound
names.
different.
Yeah, I have names, for all my alters, and we all have different personalities. I know that my main protectors, Katrina and Cole, they are complete polar opposites. Um, like, I remember one distinction that my friends used to be able to tell is that they knew that I was Cole and not Cat if I was smoking a menthol cigarette,
Mm,
which I don't like.
right. Interesting.
Um, it's a lot of different likes and dislikes. The way they talk can change a lot sometimes. Um, I know what that Cole tends to kind of be more of like that skater boy kind of sound where everything is totally rad, but
Mm,
it's their way of expressing themselves because a lot of the times if they don't get to act like themselves, they have to pretend to be me, which
right.
can be hard for some of them.
Sure. Um, so I guess are there also different like interests that the alters will have?
Mhm. I have another alter, Trixie. She likes to dance. I can't dance worth a damn. Uh, some alters like to draw. I like to sing. Cole likes to play video games.
So you said you can dance, can Trixie dance? Does
Mhm.
it translate?
I can't. I can dance, just not good. Trixie, she can groove to almost any beat, and she can like move her hips and have that sort of hand-eye coordination that I just don't have.
Interesting. Um, is there ever like conflict between the alters? What does that feel like?
Um, I guess a simple way to put it is a lot of shit talking.
Mm,
It's a lot of putting each other down, which can translate into just a normal depression whenever the host me, whenever I'm out and I know that something is deeply unsettling, I feel like I am unsettled.
right.
Um, and I can feel like the arguing and like the tugging from like side to side. It translates to me in like physical tactile feelings. Not everybody experiences that, but I'll physically feel tight and like in pain whenever people are fighting up there because it's just a lot of negativity and a lot of hateful thoughts that just keep bumping around.
What would usually trigger a fight?
Typically what somebody does whenever they're out or
Mm.
somebody who's taking control of the front tooth for too long, or somebody like if one person leaves a note behind saying, "Hey, whoever's out next, do this," and it doesn't get done, it's like, well, you're dragging all of us behind because you're just doing fun shit instead of keeping the body responsible.
And how does these fights get resolved?
Talking. It's a
Um,
lot of inward communication. It's hard to describe. I describe it as meditation, just
mm.
trying to gain sort of sort of a peacefulness on the inside.
Is it ever like a type of thing where like one alter will like apologize to the other, or is it more
Yeah.
abstract than that?
It's either that or there's a few times where I've just suddenly felt better, and I'll be
Mm.
like, I'll meditate for a little bit and I'll kind of calm myself down. I'll just kind of think to myself like, is everything still okay? And then all of a sudden just be like, yeah, we're good now. Don't worry about it. You don't need to know.
And so in this experience, you you don't feel like these are different sides of you. You feel like you're one body that encompasses multiple minds.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I'm just trying to kind of process that. Right?
I
'Cause
know it's a little hard to kind of grasp without prior understanding. It was
it,
definitely difficult for me to feel without just feeling broken
it
or
comes,
or damaged.
yeah, it feels very counterintuitive because, like, to me, it makes the realization aspects definitely make sense. Um, I can, I think, very much understand the idea of coping with trauma in those kinds of ways. Um, but I guess, like, psychologically for me, like, I know that hmm, and maybe, I'm saying this without knowing what it's like, but I feel like I would have the kind of psychology where I would view those alters as ultimately being other sides of me, just in that disconnect. That
Yeah.
that's I think that's how I would interpret it if I was going through it. But again, I don't know. Yeah.
It's just they feel so separated from me and how I would define who I am
Mhm.
that it doesn't feel honest to
Right,
say that it's just a different half or like a different little portion.
right. That's really interesting. Um, and like I said, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your journey. And obviously, I hope that you can keep healing. Whatever that looks like for you. Um, I've always been really fascinated in the mind and all the different forms that it can take, and in trying to understand, how would I put this? I think that understanding, and I hope you don't take this in like a bad way, because I don't think it's meant to be a bad way, but in understanding the outliers and understanding experiences that are rare, I think it can help enlighten aspects of subjective experience as a whole.
I
Does that
definitely
make
agree.
sense?
I
Yeah.
definitely agree. It is interesting. I feel like even outside of the mental health realm and like what it is, how do you fix it? It's it always fascinates me that the brain will do literally anything to protect itself. And the brain will make itself think anything or do anything to get out of something that is scary. And I think that that is amazing that humans are able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that the stigma that comes along with mental health, I think, is very unfortunate. Like, people will look at the ID and I think in some ways even misinterpret it. Like they see it as, and again, not to say that I'm sure it comes with its challenges and difficulties, but I think it's a testament to, you know, the brain protecting itself and the capacity that we have to navigate life even through horrible things and keep us going. I think it's in some sense a strength almost.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think it's magnificent. And although that there's a lot of stigma, especially in Hollywood, whenever it comes to things like this, it's not, I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. It's not like the movie Split.
Right.
There is not some superhuman, super strong demon alter who's gonna hurt everybody and can climb walls and rip metal open. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that's not how it works. Like, it's far less likely that anybody's going to hurt other people because this disorder is a coping mechanism for people who've been hurt.
Was that movie meant to uh, reflect the ID, or was it?
It was a dramatization, um, and as a film lover, I enjoyed it,
Mm.
but as somebody who lives like that, it hurt
Right.
because there are so many examples in storybooks and other movies and TV shows that take advantage of that, "Oh, you're this whole other person now, you could do anything and not remember it." It's fear-mongering, and so
Right.
people will look at really high profile movies like Split and think that, "Oh, that's what it's like."
Right. Um, yeah, that makes sense. I remember watching the movie and enjoying it. I think maybe I was might have misinterpreted it when I was watching it, because I kind of came out of it thinking that um, it wasn't that he actually had the ID. So there was something actually like supernatural going on, as opposed to. But maybe I
Yeah,
think I
I
just
think tying it into, like, the Unbreakable franchise, I think is what it was.
right,
That
right,
was wild, but in in the movie, like, it does very it does give very good information whenever he's, like, talking to his therapist and
right.
trying to talk about those things and how she's able to tell who she's talking to on how they act,
Hmm.
and her giving a panel on these kinds of changes in the brain and how it lights up and how it responds to stimulus. There were some things that that movie did a pretty good job on,
Yeah,
but it's the demonization of disorders like this that make people with mental disorders seem like monsters.
right, and or dangerous, and yeah. I think you said something earlier that I thought was interesting, which is that you feel like it would be wrong to go the integration route and to kind of remove the alters as alters. So I guess if you had the capacity to remember everything and know that you could deal with it like as the host without problems, or at least without more problems than I think anybody else, you would choose not to do that because you feel like it would be wrong to remove them, right?
Yeah, it also feels like I'm at this moment still not at a stage. Sorry about that.
You're good.
I feel like I'm not yet at a stage where I could trust myself knowing all of that knowledge. I feel like
Sure.
all of those memories would just overwhelm me.
Yeah, and I think healing looks different for everybody, right? Like I don't think that integration has to be the goal for anybody if that is not what is best for them. Courtney writes, DID is one of the more interesting and important features of the human brain. It's the way that personality can split for protection to each individual. It's a way for each person to bear a portion.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Like, there are some things that I just don't feel suited for, but I know that other parts of me are.
Right.
And those are strengths that were able to be built outside of my consciousness.
Right. Right. Um, so we're getting close to the 1 hour mark. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think anybody listening to this would benefit from learning about as far as the ID?
I feel like anybody who wants to know more should try to figure out everything that they can in a way that makes sense for them. I'm all for education, and in the age of the internet, I feel like it's sort of impossible to not be able to find information for yourself,
Sure.
if that makes sense. But
Sure.
I also feel like, some people will never learn about something if they're never pointed in that direction.
Right. Right. Um, well, listen, I really want to thank you for sharing your journey with us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think one of the things I try to do with my channel is spread education and awareness of all these things. And because I think from ignorance comes dehumanization, and I think that when people and their different experiences are normalized and understood, then we can come from a place of empathy, and uh, I think it leads to a better society. So I appreciate you coming up and helping in that project. So
I appreciate you having me. I'm
yeah,
all for spreading whatever knowledge I can.
great. Well, I want to thank everybody that came in and listened and asked questions, and anybody that might listen to this in the future. I hope this was beneficial. And Kat, again, I want to thank you for coming on, and I wish you all the best going forward in your healing journey. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having the space to talk about this freely.
Of
It's
course,
it's very
and
nice.
anytime you want to come back, just message me, and I would love to talk with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do it.
I hope everybody stays safe, and we'll be back with another episode of Access on Trials later in the week, maybe the weekend sometime. Uh, definitely let you guys know. So thanks again.